Okay, so welcome to this third podcast. Today I'm very excited to be speaking with Roger Terry. And Roger Terry is an international NLP Master Trainer and public speaker. As an expert in Neuro Linguistic Programming and Human Value System, Roger leads seminars and consults with organizations in the UK, US, Europe, and the Middle East. He is the author of 3 books, one of which I have here and I've had for many years, about NLP for teachers. And Roger has, with Henrie Liddiard, trained over 1,000 fast-track teachers in NLP. He set up Evolution Training with his wife Emily in 1996, where they run courses and work as coaches, helping people to reach their full potential. So welcome, Roger. Really lovely to have you.
Thanks. Here. Really great to be here.
So as I was explaining before, the idea with these podcasts is I see that we are in a challenging time with what's happening with COVID-19, the lockdown. And really what I'd like to do is just kind of almost learn tools and techniques to help men at this time, how they can get through this time, how they can, start to thrive again, kind of rise to the challenge. And I thought you'd be the perfect person to speak to, having
maybe not perfection, but well.
Well, I felt, because the background is I first met you 2006. We did a men's workshop together.
We did.
Yeah. It was Johannes, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
And
at that mill, it was great.
Yeah. And then I did the NLP training with you in 2009, 2010, and the hypnotherapy. So what I'd like you to do at the beginning is maybe just explain a little bit about yourself and what's drawn you into this work of personal development and your journey.
Well, I'll try and make it not too long. So my background, where I started off, I'm a scientist by background. I'm a microbiologist, biochemist, biologist. That's my discipline, where I come from, and worked for a long while in the water utility sector, running drinking water testing laboratories. And my career was really nice, because I jumped from there into doing IT training, and jumped from there into doing industrial relations, and jumped from there into running a bottled water company. I don't know how I managed it, but I had some of these times, I have this philosophy that if a door opens up, you should walk through it. See what happens. So that's kind of how I've run things. And then the last thing I did, the last proper job I had, as I say to people, was I was a business development director for an environmental consultancy. So I kind of went back to science. While I was doing that, I uncovered NLP, because at some point you kind of run out of your natural resources and need to kind of find new ways to do things. And it provided me with so many really solid, good ways to change what I was doing, change my own attitude and approach, change how I communicated, change some of the patterns that I was running. It really made a difference. It just happened that as life progressed, one door closed, and due to a reorganization and to the company being purchased, I found I had the opportunity to be paid to go away. So 1996, I started Evolution Training with Emily. And, our focus was, let's train people NLP, but it's opened itself out into, not just that, but, personal development. We follow our own path as well, in terms of our own evolution and spiritual development. So that comes to play in lots of things. I'm a squirrel. I like to find all sorts of things, or am I a magpie? I'm not sure really. One of the two. So I've got a broad interest, not just NLP. I'm interested in human design. I'm interested in the tarot, and how those archetypes play out in our lives, and how we can use that as a way of stimulating our unconscious mind. So there's a whole load of things that kind of play into my kind of view of the world, and then I do my best to put my science hat on as often as possible so that we don't get too bonkers and woolly. And try and do my best to bring some of the stuff back down to our biological drives and our DNA and the things that, and the cultural things that have driven us to be the way we are. I'm particularly thinking about men at this time. I think, notwithstanding the COVID crisis, that's just magnified things.
Yes.
What you and I have been talking about for a while has always been there, but when you get something like this happening, then it kind of throws a spotlight on it, and people become, we're thrown on our own resources in a way, because we're locked down and locked in. So that's by turns difficult for some people and easier for others. For me, it's great. I think if you've been doing that kind of work for many years, then you kind of actually relish the opportunity to have a bit of time where you're on your own resources, and you can kind of spend some time thinking about things and producing some new stuff, new thoughts, making some new connections, reconnecting with you after 10 years really, in a way, although we've known about you in the periphery, so it's good for us to reconnect, bring our wisdoms together. So here I am, I'm 22 years old, teaching people NLP and spiral dynamics, which is about human value systems, which is fundamentally a really brilliant piece of work, and gives us a lot of understanding of cultures and how they've developed, and personalities too. So all that brings us here to this kind of conversation, and thinking, particularly about men at this point, what's going on? How come there is this underlying kind of need that we haven't seen before, and it's interesting, today's VE Day, 75th anniversary since the war finished, and I think, and I was thinking about this prior to talking to you, and we're kind of, how do you understand, what are men doing at the moment? I think there's a thing about understanding their emotions and that emotional register, and from that kind of knowing who they are and their place and why that's their place. And I think this is possibly new for a lot of people, because they haven't been thrown into that, haven't been in that place, and we haven't been in that place. For until the 1950s, I was born in 53, so I'm 67, so I can kind of look back at that period. This is the first period of 60 years odd where we have not had any world wars, where we haven't had millions of men die and go out of the gene pool. In the First World War, 2 million people died on the Somme, let alone anywhere else, which and then the Second World War. So the male gene pool, putting my science hat on for a second, I think got depleted. Now we're 60 years in, and from that, we know now that that our memories can get coded on in the protein sheath around the DNA. Some great work by Bruce Lipton. So we know we carry something forward, and I think what men have carried forward and haven't been able to resolve until perhaps now, when we've had 2 or 3 generations of no war, no big war anyway, and we've had little wars, but no war where we have been people have been conscripted into the army and told you're going to go and fight. I think, we have still got embedded what I would call a battle consciousness inside us, where we go to battle with ourselves, apart from anything else. And in the times when we were in wars, our emotions, we just put them away. So there's also that kind of thread of men put their emotions away, because you've got to do that if you're going to go away and fight. So this big period of peace creates a shift in consciousness, I think. It allows that space for something else to happen. And of course, I think that's the kind of the search, so it's a search for that route to maturity that we were talking about in terms of the archetypes. That route to maturity was not what the route was, go to war, fight a battle, become a warrior. But actually that warrior route's not there very much anymore, so we have to find another way to do it.
Yeah.
But we still have that battle consciousness, I think, kind of inside us. I don't know whether you would agree with that.
Yeah, I guess I do. I feel, it's like, I think Robert Moore talks about it in Rod Boothroyd, this thing about the warrior within, the warrior archetype, that we have that there. It's just, we just don't access it very much, and I think I saw one of my friends, one of our colleagues saying about men, if there was problems in the past, they would have been like Braveheart, stood up, whereas now we don't do that anymore. We don't have access. So
not to that positive
no.
warrior space. We have access to definitely to the negative sides of that, and often that comes out and you get abuse and you get all of those kind of things that when that just shows that many men are in a battle with themselves to know where their place is. And all of this time, while we've been fighting battles, women have developed in a different way. They're ahead of us. I know this I say this because when I was talking to you earlier on, when I run an NLP course, whether it's online or face to face, it's pretty much a 70-30 split, 70% women, 30% men. It's best, and it can be one man and a group of women. So we're not pushing forward as we need to in terms of our own self-development. We are not used to change, and I think that's another thing you could think about. Well, what's the difference here? So from a biological perspective, women are in a change cycle the whole time. Their biological cycles shift, their hormones shift, their emotions shift, so they're quite mutable, whereas men are quite fixed. And I think that in itself is interesting in terms of, well, how come we don't change so much? Well, because change isn't a norm for us in many ways. So then we've got a bit more of a hill to climb. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be a norm. It doesn't mean we can't do it or anything like that. It's not about capacity or capability. It's about where we've got to. So somehow people like you and I have to persuade men that actually they can change and shift things, and it's not that difficult.
How do you
need an idea of where to go?
Yeah, thank you. So in, say, one of your NLP courses, you've got 2 or 3 men. How do you connect to them to help them to make that shift? What are some of the tools that you say to them, knowing what you know?
I think the first step is to get them to think about it, to think about development, to think about how they want to develop. Because many people turn up because typically men like to learn a few tools, and actually, although NLP is full of tools, actually it's more about changing the way you think about the human beings in a way they store and hold information, and many other things as well. So first of all, it's how do you get somebody to shift their thinking so that opens up. So we're not just looking for the next hammer or the next screwdriver or the next power tool. Metaphorically, we're actually looking for something much more architectural. So that's kind of the first step. When you've got that, then the tools that we provide with NLP make sense, because you have to kind of, in a way, have those experiences where people find actually they can change something. And sometimes, in my groups, when I've had men who've suddenly found they've shifted, it's been a shock, because they've suddenly accessed a part of themselves that they didn't know was there, for the good. So it can be quite, I think it can be quite tough. And for those of us that have been doing this for 20 odd years, then we don't think that way, but we have to appreciate that that's the start point. That it can be quite a surprise to suddenly find that it's actually not that difficult to shift your beliefs, to move a belief, to change it, upgrade it, get rid of it, all of those kind of things that that you can do with NLP, as well as change patterns of habit that aren't serving you.
So it sounds like it's like changing our thinking, and it's that willingness to almost put aside the critical mind or the thinking mind, just right, going to try this out.
It's go for an experience. You know, how can you provide? Because I think that's one of the best ways you can work is that what experiences can we give people that will allow them to think about things differently. Well, you can read all the books you like, and you can tell people of your views or etc. and how things look, but unless they have a visceral experience, you know, we get knowledge through our bodies of having experience and of something moving, and that's NLP is particularly good at doing that because it works on that mind body those mind body parameters. So can we give people a physical experience of something changing inside? And to do that, the first thing you need to do is to build up what in NLP we call sensory acuity. You've got to be able to observe differences. If you're not observing differences in yourself and and in other people, when you get to that point, you can't tell, you can't register the change. So the first step is how do I notice things? And that's an essential part of the training of NLP. And it looks, for the most part, like it's pointed outwards, like I'm noticing, if I'm watching you, then I'm noticing how you're changing. But actually, the more important part is noticing what happens inside me. We've got a visceral sense inside ourselves with sensations inside ourselves. If we pay attention to it, it can give us a huge amount of information. And I think that's the thing with the NLP model, is that in a way it teaches you how to use your senses in a way as bigger information streams and discrete information streams, so that you can focus on I'm doing something, what's happening inside my body, are my sensations changing? We're so apt to label things and go, I'm feeling sad, happy, mad, whatever it is, and that's just a label for a set of sensations in your body which are created by the chemistry in yourself. So get hold of the chemistry, find ways of working with that. You can change your behaviors, you can change all sorts of things.
Okay. So what I'm hearing here is like it's like the first step is almost, it's like that mindfulness, bringing that awareness inside. And I'm often hearing this with men. I remember speaking to a friend years ago, and he's saying that first time he did meditation, the meditation teacher says, feel your legs. And he was like, I can't feel my legs. He realized he had a problem then. So the first step really for us is to start to become more aware when we're speaking to our wife, our children. What am I feeling? What are the physical sensations?
Have that portion of you with that internal focus. And it's, the spiritual traditions, there are many spiritual traditions that suggest, build a witness consciousness. And you need to build a little bit of a witness consciousness so you can witness yourself. And then you can pay attention to, what is going on in your body. And the more you know about that, the more you'll understand what happens to somebody else. The more you'll be able to accurately read signals. And I don't mean read signals to interpret them, but read signals that feed into our communication, so that we can communicate more effectively at a better bandwidth, if you like, so we can match our bandwidths together. In NLP we would call that rapport. When we get that far, when we get that level of understanding.
So I guess an interesting question which comes to me here is that what I'm hearing is, in the past, the men, we've gone out to war, we've gone outward. It seems almost now we've kind of gone inward on one level. But how do we find that balance almost, that we don't, because what I hear from men sometimes is, especially in relationships, is there might be in conflict with the partner, but they can take it really personally and they collapse. And how do we as men, being aware of what we feel but not get lost there?
So as men we always have an outward forward movement. But biologically, that's what we do. you know. So we have to keep that awareness of that kind of forward momentum. And, you know, in a way, you know, immature, what's a mature male's kind of, what are, you know, there are many things you could say about it, but there are probably three things that you might say. You know, what we do is we provide, we protect, and we see. That's the kind of, that's a useful three things. Any one of those go out. When I coach people, men, if any one of those three are out of sync, and I don't mean by seed, I mean ideas and, you know, the general kind of output of humans. If any one of those are out of sync or stopped, then it creates a problem. It creates, it's an embedded thing for millions of years. So it creates difficulty, and it creates self-esteem issues and self-worth issues and self-acceptance issues. So all of those things can happen. So yes, you know, I think we do have to start with ourselves, but that doesn't mean we should disappear inside and never come out again. We have to be mature. We have to do both. To go inside and go, well, what am I feeling at the moment, and not just label it and go, well, at the moment, for instance, you know, I can feel a sensation at the bottom of my rib cage, and in my top half of my chest, and a little bit in my voice box as I'm talking about things that are exciting, that mean a lot to me. So I can monitor those sensations, but I can still do my output. You know, and it takes training to do that. You can't just turn it on. It takes training, and it takes weird exercises, as you know, because you've done some of them. It takes weird exercises, and this is why people go, oh, this is soft and fluffy stuff, because it forces that inward look for the moment, because you need to be able to have that sensory acuity around yourself. So I think for me, you know, the first step is to how do we build a bit of that sensory acuity, and so that we read our own messages accurately, and not have something going on in our bodies and go, ooh, we make a meaning of it and say, that means I'm mad, or that means I'm sad, or that means I'm hurt. They are just sensations in your body that you put a label on. You could put a different label on them. Those things I've just talked about, I could put a label and say that means I'm nervous.
Yeah.
Or I'm scared.
Yeah.
But that's only a label. And once you know about those sensations, you can start to move them around. You can make them smaller, you can make them bigger.
Right.
You can give them colors, you can give them shapes. You know, you begin to be in control of that internal world. And when you get that level of control of your internal world, then it reflects outside as well.
Okay, so I'd love in a moment for you to maybe share a little process with that, with kind of maybe guiding us how to change, you know, some of these feelings and states.
Sure.
Because I think that would be really powerful.
Yeah.
So
we can do a little bit of an awareness exercise and guide some change on it. So
that would be great, because I'm feeling, like you said, you know, men often come to courses like NLP in order to learn tools and practice. I know that's, you know, that's very much me. I love practices. I love learning things.
It is a male way, you know, that is how we think.
So what I'm hearing is, you know, if every day we have a practice of sensory acuity, we begin our day by just, whether it's just feeling the physical sensation sat in meditation. Is that the type of thing you recommend to people? Absolutely.
It's a very good way to start building that awareness consciously. And then, you know, what happens as we practice something and as we develop a habit, it becomes a stream of unconscious information that comes to us. So we kind of know where we are and who we are, because we've got that feed of information. But it's you know, one of the things that the NLP model gives you is a really good way of understanding how we code our experiences, how we code everything with our senses. There isn't anything in you apart that isn't recorded with your senses, because that's the only way you've got to input. You've got language too, but even language is ultimately coded down with your senses.
Mm.
So everything's pictures, sounds, feelings, tastes, and smells. And the more you work with that, the more you can know where you are and what you're doing and where you are in space and how you're reacting and how you can actually say, this is not how I want to react. You know, everybody has states, whether they be happy, sad, whatever the state is, but states chemically only last for about 2 minutes. So you can think that every 2 minutes I've got the opportunity to shift. Now, because as human beings, as bodies, we're very efficient. It's much more efficient for me to continue having that state, because I'll just keep producing the same chemicals. To actually shift, I've got to put a bit of energy into it, put a bit of something extra into it to make it move. Which is why, you know, you can wake up in the morning and feel grumpy, and you'll carry on feeling grumpy until somebody maybe tells you a joke, or you meet somebody and have a smile, and then suddenly you're not grumpy anymore because the chemicals in your body have changed. So one of the delightful things that I think NLP teaches you, and certainly the way I come from it, is that it teaches you to have some level of control about that chemistry, and to produce positive chemistry as opposed to negative chemistry.
And
the more you go around with thinking negative thoughts, then that gives you negative feelings. You're producing a particular sort of chemical.
And is that something you think is happening quite a bit with what's happening with the lockdown, you know, on a general level? Is that people have gone into that negative state or fear?
I think for certain, some people will have done. They will have hit that. They would hit that negative state, giving it a label. Some people it's not going to be the same for everybody, but that's certainly entirely possible. And that could lead to frustration, or, you know, many other ways of being. But to know that you don't have to be like that you actually have got windows to change. But then you need to know, what do I do to change my state?
Yeah, I'd love you to guide us through that. It kind of brings in for me what you were saying about Bruce Lipton talking about that, about, you know, how the body, when we're in fear, our energy goes into our extremities, and our immune systems, you know, actually when we're in happiness and we're feeling joy, we're not feeling the stress, then our immune system really bolstered by that.
Absolutely. So, you know, we just think very simply, you know, we've got our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous system. And when we're in flight and fight, and we're in fear and other negative emotions, our sympathetic nervous system is active. We're producing cortisol, and we're producing adrenaline, which is the one, but we're also producing cortisol, which kind of floats around in the body as well. And, you know, one of the things I teach in my courses is how you switch, how you can switch. What are the biological switches from sympathetic to parasympathetic nervous system? Because when you're in your sympathetic nervous system, well, you're absolutely right what you say. The blood flows away from your brain because you want to run away. We're designed millions and millions of years. We've had to run away and not be somebody's prey, or we've had to go into battle. Either way, so we've biologically designed that when we hit that sympathetic nervous system, that flight or fight, we don't need blood in our brain for that, and it flows away from our frontal lobes, judgment and emotional management. It also flows away from their hearing, so their hearing shuts down in the worst cases. There's a lot of research on firefights and gunfights where people they can't hear somebody shout "get down" or a command to move, because there's so much flight and fight going on, the hearing is shut down. This is a really interesting response, and although I'm talking about the extreme responses, you know, even a mild response like that's going to make you slightly dysfunctional. You know, people say, "Oh, stress is good for you." I think it's not. I think, you know, being stressed is not good for us. When we shift to our parasympathetic nervous system, we have a different brainwave pattern. Our minds are more open. Our immune system's much better at coping, because our system's not having to get rid of lots of cortisol and adrenaline hormones, which aren't needed all the time. You don't really want those in your body all the time. They're for those times when you've got in a real emergency or a real danger situation. So the more we can switch our biology over into the parasympathetic nervous system, the better, really. We can talk about how you do that actually, because that's also a really useful thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I'd love you to speak a bit more about
There's
that.
a couple of things that we can do that are simple to
Mm.
do to help do that. If we want to get into the practical stuff, which is kind of fun, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm up for that. I mean, as you know, I love spending a long time in my day doing practices. So yeah, that would be great if you could tell us some of these switches which changes from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, we can do a couple of those. Certainly.
Great.
So where would you like to go? Do you want to just do a little sensing thing?
I think so. Let's do, let's begin with that, the sensory acuity. Let's begin with that, because I think sometimes I find talking, it's good to have that little break.
Absolutely.
So let's do a little exercise. Yeah, beautiful.
So I think the a useful way to do this is just to put some attention on the inside. So we often, you can close your eyes or open your eyes, it doesn't really matter, but you can put your attention on the inside. And just as you go inside, notice what sensations you have in your body, and without resist the urge to label them and say it means this or it means that, because that's not where we're going with this. But maybe, like I described earlier on, that I you might find that you have a sensation in your solar plexus. You've got a brain in your solar plexus. You've got a big neurological bit of equipment there, so it's going to generate sensation. So it's a good place to start. So if you put your attention on the solar plexus and go, well, what can I notice? What do I notice there? And how big is it? For me, I can notice a slight pressure there, and about the size of a bit bigger than bit like a small melon. And this is, I'm just describing what's there for me. And if I just pay attention to it, I could say that it has a kind of pale blue color. So you can do that. So just pay attention to what's on the inside. When you can start in the solar plexus, because that's a good place to start because of the neurology. But once you've kind of felt how to do that, then you can move your attention around your body and say, okay, well, if I move my attention to the upper part of my chest, what am I noticing there? What are you noticing there, Piers?
Feel a little tightness on my right lung.
Right. And you've just shown me with your hand, you've just done this with your hand. And that tells me that it's about this big. Because as we know, we will always gesture. If you ask somebody what they're feeling inside, we'll often gesture exactly where it is, and people go, I don't know, but that unconscious part of us knows. And it also, you did a good job. You showed the size, so it's about the size of a tennis ball. That tightness covers that kind of area. Would that be about right?
Yeah. And it's kind of inside.
So look, I'll just guide you through something to do with that. So
thank you.
If that was associated with an emotion you were feeling, something had happened. So the first thing you could do is you could just get the sense of that tennis ball size thing, and then what I suggest you do is just allow the edges to go fuzzy, as if you've got one of those you're erasing a pencil mark. Make it go fuzzy, and I didn't ask you what color it was. So has it got a color?
I'd say it's kind of grayish.
Right, great. So you want to start to transform that color to a whitish color, and keep it fuzzy. And does it have a weight? Good to know.
I guess now it feels quite light. Now it's white.
Yeah,
but it was probably it was.
So you can pay attention to that. So if you've got it kind of fuzzy and it's gone white and it's gone light, it's a bit more like a vapor than a solid thing. So all you need to do now is to take a breath, breathe in through your nose, and breathe out. And then go back and notice what's changed.
Yeah, it feels lighter.
Feels lighter. And has it changed size?
Yeah, a bit smaller.
A bit smaller.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so you've now just shown me it's about a quarter the size. So you can do that again and just take a breath and make sure it's like a vapor. You can even imagine it coming out of your nose. And check back. What's the difference?
Yeah, probably.
Hardly anything there. And
Yeah,
you can just do one more time, and breathe the last of it away. So, you know, if you have an emotion, you'll have a code for it. Your body will have coded it somewhere like that. So just find it, and all you need to do is to transform it. I like transforming it. You know, it seems to work best to transform it from it, depending on what, to transform it to a pale or a white color, blur the edges, make it lighter, and then you can imagine it's like steam, and you just breathe it out. And you've recoded that emotion. Then you can check in, well, how do I feel now?
I feel
just by doing that practice. Then what you're teaching your unconscious mind is to not hold an emotion, because if it was, emotions need to move, they're energy in motion. So often we kind of get them stuck, and actually all we need to do is move them. We don't need to know the whys or the wheres or any of that stuff. Just move them and see then see how you are. And if you've got a smile on your face and you feel lighter, then you've done a good job. We don't always have to delve into the why am I feeling like this and all of that kind of rationality, because all we need to do is to change. You've just changed your chemistry.
Yeah, interesting. It just reminds me of a quote. I think it's from Joe Dispenza saying the body is the unconscious mind. So by changing our bodies, we're changing the unconscious mind. We're almost bypassing.
Totally, because your unconscious mind, you can almost think it's holding that energetic pattern of your body. And you've just changed the energetic pattern, and something happens. This is a really simple process of using what in NLP we call submodalities, the qualities of our senses, to make movements.
Beautiful. Yeah, I can really feel a change there. So yeah, I recommend people, if you're listening to this, practice that.
Just if you for men, if you feel you've had an interaction and you've come away from it and you go, oh, I feel whatever it is, crummy, whatever it is. Stop for a moment, put the label away. What can I sense in my body? Where is that feeling? Oh, it's in my chest, or it's wherever it is. Then play around with, experiment with transforming it. Turn it, blur the edges, make it go pale, make it go light, turn it into a vapor and breathe it out.
So what comes to me, thank you, in that, so at the moment, because we're on lockdown, we've got this, we're with our partners quite a lot for us as men. And what happens, what can we do in the moment? Can we use that process? Say in the moment we're having a heated discussion with our partners, or we're feeling quite intense. Can we do that same thing? Or is there something else?
You can do that same thing, but what you need to do is to practice doing things like that before you get into that moment. So from what we've just said, I'd say that your brain's going to be somewhere else, to be able to do that whilst you're in that moment. But I think one of the most effective things you can do is just say, oh, look, let's just have time out. 5 minutes, go to different rooms, do this practice, do any other grounding practice, then see what happens to the substance of the argument. Probably it will evaporate. It won't seem so. And if you both do it, then even better. But at least you'll get some measure of control. And the more you teach yourself to do this, the more in the moment you will not be subject to those negative emotions, because your body will learn to do something different. If every time you did that, you went, time out, I'm going to go and do that, your unconscious mind would learn, hang on a minute, this particular state that you're going is not one that's necessary. There are other ways in NLP we can shortcut the process so you can do it in the middle, but that's a bit more teaching than we've got time to do today. So I've given you the simple way, but it's a bit like, that's the longhand way. There's a shorthand way of doing it. which would take us a bit longer to set up. And really, it's best to be face to face with people to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a but I think the principle behind this is use that sensory acuity, pay attention to yourself, have that kind of little bit of witness consciousness. Even if you can't do that in the moment and you lose it, it doesn't matter, because you can go back, remember it, find the sensation and wipe it away, like we've just done. So you can even do things in retrospect. So the next time something happens, perhaps your behavior will be different. And I think that's the challenge for men. The challenge for men is to not be fixed, to say, okay, I can change. Yeah. And I can change in a moment. I think we see that women often change very rapidly in the moment in terms of when they're in interaction, and perhaps we feel I think that as men we're a bit slower than that because we're a bit more fixed, but we can learn to be more mutable. And I think that's about gaining some male-female balance, ironically enough.
Thank you. That's really useful. I love. Yeah, for me, sometimes I hear interviews and I want to hear techniques just because I'm a man. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
that's really
like
useful.
Our caveman tools,
Yeah.
Or go out and build a spear or make an axe, but actually, we got to know how to use it.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it's the same with everything. So
okay.
this is kind of I've come to this way of thinking about NLP over the 20 years I've been training it. So, it does, when you come across it, if people come across NLP, it looks like a recipe book. And sometimes, the recipes don't work, and they don't work because you don't have the underlying structure.
Okay.
It's a bit like, you can cook from a recipe, but it's much better if you know about the ingredients and then you can put anything together, even if you haven't got quite what you need. It's a cooking metaphor.
No, I like it.
Yeah.
So, I guess the other question is, you're mentioning about these switches.
Yeah.
So what are some switches that we could use to take us from the sympathetic, the cortisol states into more of the parasympathetic?
Let's do the simplest switch that you could, and it's one of those kind of, you go, how come that didn't occur to me? If you think about this flight and fight response, we're either going to, the first one is run away, and the second one is fight. And then the third one, which is actually something that's been recognized a bit more, is called flop. So it can be flight, fight, or flop. And flop is a response where you play dead. So some people will have a flop response. They'll just play dead. They'll go completely out of consciousnness. However, flight and fight are the two that happen most. So think about, we've had this reaction, this stress, danger, emergency, this danger reaction for, I don't know, I've had hundreds of millions of years. We've been evolved like this, just like the other animals. So what's it designed to do? You get something, at some saber-toothed tiger or some other animal, say, coming at you, you've got to run away. You're not going to fight it because it's going to eat you. So you've got to run, and run fast. So you don't need blood in your brain. You just need a focus as to where you're going. And this is what happens when we get this flight and fight kick in. We get very focal vision, because we need the focal vision if we're running away, because we need to see accurately where we're going. And that's only what we need to see. And we need to see that crevice in the rocks where we can get into it, where we're not going to get eaten. The blood flows away from our brain, away from our digestive system, out to our muscles in our legs, mainly. And we breathe, and we run like hell. So we're in total flight as fast as we can go. So when we've got away, supposing we don't get eaten, we get away from the danger. What happens to our bodies? We come up, we get into that crevice in the rock and in a little cave, and we sit down. How's our physiology going to be? We're going to be breathing hard, right? hard and fast, because we need the oxygen. So as we recover, what happens to our breathing? It slows down.
Yeah.
So the slowing down of the breathing signals your body to come out of the sympathetic nervous system flight and fight response, and triggers you into your more into your parasympathetic. So we don't have to go mad and run away like that. That's just the extreme case. But if we're feeling anxious, stressed, in fear, worry, any of those states, then the easiest thing to do, the easiest switch to trigger is your breathing switch. And the only thing you need to do there is to pay attention to your breathing. And if you can experiment with this, put your attention on your breath. And as soon as you do that, it slows down. That inner attention signals your breathing to slow down. And when you slow your breathing down, it starts to trigger that other it tries to trigger you into the parasympathetic nervous system. So even if you're in a difficult situation, and this is probably the easy thing to do, is to just slow your breathing down. If you're having a conflict with your partner, with your children, you can slow your breathing down. As you slow your breathing down, you'll find it will center you as well. You'll feel more grounded. Might take you half a dozen breaths or more. It's not going to happen on one breath. But slow your breathing down. That will produce more blood in your brain. You'll be able to think. You'll be able to think better. So when we get stressed and our blood flows away from the brain, we can't think. Not only can't we hear what the other person's saying very well, they'll be saying something, but we won't necessarily understand it because it's not being processed properly. We can't, our emotional management and judgment's out, so we won't be able to make the right responses. So we'll respond reflexively. So if you ask yourself, why do the army, the police, people that get in firefights teach reflexes when they shoot? It's because you can't use your conscious mind. It's got to be done on reflex. So whenever you get into a conflict and you start getting that adrenaline in your system, you can know that your mind is starved of blood, and you won't be thinking straight. So just that one thing is really powerful to slow you down. And you know that those of us that do meditation and do things like that, as we slow our breath down, our state changes profoundly.
Yeah, I noticed a shift as soon as you said that. It's like, oh yeah, the breathing, deep breaths. As soon as I looked, yeah, that's really. And
it's not, this is not a yogic, mad, weird breathing technique. It's just what human physiology does. It's just using the biology to assist you to shift your state. Use your body to shift your state. One of the things we say in NLP, the fastest way to change your state is to change your physiology. And that's one way to do it. If you have somebody that's upset and in tears, the thing not to do is to put your arm around them and go, there. The thing to do is to say, come on, let's go for a walk round the garden, quite fast. Look at the sky. That'll change the state quickly. When you've changed when somebody's in a different state, then you're going to have a different conversation. It's called a pattern interrupt.
Great. I really like this because, please go ahead.
No, I was just saying, interrupting pattern is, the first thing. You've got to interrupt your own patterns. Learn how to interrupt your own patterns so that you can develop new patterns. But first of all, you've got to be aware of your patterns. You've got to be aware of your reactions.
Okay, thank you. Wow, I feel you've given loads of really great tools and techniques here, especially for us, who are on lockdown. Maybe people listen to this later on, but this is really useful. This internal focus, and changing our physiology, changing our breathing, how that changes our state. So
simple things are the best because they're the easiest to do. There's lots of complicated stuff you can do with NLP, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant, and it deals with lots of good stuff, and it can produce great results. But actually, some of the simple stuff is, I think, most profound in terms of, and I often say in my courses, tell me about your blinding flashes of the obvious, because it's kind of like I knew it, but I didn't know it. So it's a blinding flash of the obvious, and I think that's like the breathing thing. Well, that makes total sense. How come I never thought about that myself? Because sometimes you just don't.
Thank you, Roger. So I realise we're kind of coming towards the end of our hour here.
Sure.
So are there any final bits of, practices or any final things you'd like to say, just to share with men at this time?
I was just thinking about this earlier on. I was thinking, okay, well, what, for men that want to evolve themselves, what could the things could they look at to help them? And I think it kind of occurred to me there are a couple of stages here, and we've really been talking about stage one, and that's to do with we could say it's sensory acuity, and it could be some NLP, it could be hypnosis, it could be tapping, which we've talked about before, it could be kinesiology, the kind of physical, the mind body things that help you get yourself in a better place. Then that's stage one. So then stage two would be the spiritual tools, meditation, ceremony, martial arts, just being in nature. And for men, I think one of the most important things is to do some group activities with men. I think we're used to doing teamwork with a leader, and actually we need to do cooperative work. We need to learn how to do that, because sometimes I think we don't truly get that. I train in business, and one of the things I've been training is collaboration. You think it's really easy to do, but it needs a high degree of human understanding to do collaboration properly. And what we end up teaching when we teach collaboration is not tools. We end up teaching people about people so that they don't get triggered. And I think that's the thing that men can learn, is to learn that cooperative nature where they're not triggered, to learn how to not be triggered by things. And I think we can learn that together as men, because we can learn how to, and then we can take it out into the wider sphere. And it's kind of, that's and reflections and feedback, and there are some profiling tools I think that are really useful, things like the Enneagram, things like human design, and even to a certain extent, astrology are useful. Anything that allows you to have a mirror, knowing that mirror is not you, but it's a reflection. So having some of those reflections I think is useful, because it gives you another way of looking at yourself.
Thank you, Roger. So how do they get in touch with you?
You can email me. My email is roger.roger, no D in it, roger.terry, T-R-R-Y, @evolutiontraining.co.uk. You can phone me on 01243 792 122. Okay. So email's probably the easiest way, because I get that and I can reply. I'm available for coaching, running some trainings this year, whatever's necessary. I'm always happy to talk.
Great.
That didn't go. That went in a different direction from where I thought it might go, but hey, it's good.
Yeah,
that's got another hour here.
Yeah, I think I've still got lots of questions.
We didn't answer some of the questions, but that's fine.
We didn't. So so I recommend, please get in touch with Roger. If you go onto Amazon, this book, this is a great book. There's also the NLP toolbox.
Here. Oh, where's that? There it is.
Oh,
Okay, that's disappearing. Never mind.
The NLP toolbooks. You go to Roger Terry on Amazon and you'll find his books there.
Yeah.
And yeah, his courses are great. So if you get a chance to do some courses or coaching with him, then
yeah, I'm going to be doing more coaching and what I call micro training. So within the coaching, some little sessions of training, so I can really focus somebody on picking up the skills they need. That's going to be my kind of the way I'm moving forward in my as life moves as we come out of this COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. I thank you for supporting
My pleasure.
us as men, you know, to deal with these times,
yep.
and giving us some really great tools to deal with relationships or emotions as they're coming up. So I think that's really important. So thank you.
And just know it's just the start, and there's there's lots more that you can learn, and it's good fun.
Great. So I'll finish the recording now, but I'll speak to you after this. So thank you to everyone. Please share this video.
Thanks.
And thank you, Roger. Okay.
Thank you.
Care.
Bye.